Welcome back. Part 3 of Water and Natural Resources Law, March 25th. We were just beginning to talk about Chapter 2432, the pre-sale preparation. This is stated in terms of gates. You can think of it as steps. In any event, they use the term gate. So if you're representing a client in this context, you'll use the word gate. So gate 1 is the initial planning of a timber sale project. Project, by the way, means project for the purpose of NEPA. It doesn't mean anything grandiose for the purpose of a timber operator. It just means a timber sale will occur in a given national forest. That's a project for NEPA purposes, and gate 1 is the initial planning of it. Gate 2 is, in effect, designing what is permitted in that timber sale. So how many board feet will be permitted. There may be other metrics such as the minimum size of the tree, proximity to streams, and so forth. Gate 3 is preparation of a timber sale. Again, this has to do with certain physical activities, including roads in the national forest. Gate 4, you advertise the timber sale, meaning you solicit bids. Gate 5, you open the bids. And by the way, this is a very formal process. As a general matter, as I suggested before, the Forest Service is a very political agency, meaning it is subject to political pressure at every level. But for a timber sale, the rules are quite strict. You submit a sealed bid, and there's no talking about it. You can't call up a buddy in the district office and say, hey, what did my competitor do? You can't do that, not legally. Instead, it's much more like an adjudicatory proceeding. Gate 5 is the bid opening, where the Forest Service reviews the sealed bids and evaluates them. As a general matter, you can bid more than the minimum. You can add other conditions that you think are beneficial to the Forest Service, and this chapter, 2432.5, describes the evaluation criteria which the Forest Service will use to decide between competing bids. Gate 6 is the award of a timber sale contract. In effect, that is a contract to extract timber. It is also a lease for the purpose of access to the land. It has a term, it sunsets. It has other conditions that are necessary to protect the sustained yield of all beneficial uses. For example, you can't build a road anywhere. If you need to build a new road in order to access the merchantable timber, then you must get the specific permission of the Forest Service. If you don't get that permission, you must use a helicopter or some other technique not requiring a new road in order to extract the timber, and so forth. So that's the end of the line for a timber operation on a national forest, namely a timber sale, and then implementation by the timber operator. I wish I could say any questions, but I can't, so I will take questions when I next see you. But let's quickly turn now from timber operations on federal lands to timber operations on non-federal lands. So there are actually state forests that are open to timber operations, as was true for oil and gas. Generally speaking, the state agencies, which are the counterparts to the Forest Service, have rules something like what I just described. But by and large, the timber operations in the West that are not on national forest are on private lands. One of the largest landowners in the western United States, for example, is named Red Emerson. He owns he holds lands, forest lands, for timber operations throughout the Sierra. So on those lands, if you own them, Can you do anything you want? No, you can't, because there is a state law enacted really for the same purposes that we discussed last week in the context of oil and gas, to address externalities, namely the sediment load that may wash downstream, or adverse impacts on fish and wildlife, or for that matter, adverse impacts on local communities. In any event, the Forest Practices Act is the name of this law in California. It applies to these private forests and establishes minimum standards for protection of environmental quality and also for protection of communities. So that applies. If you don't own the forest and instead are seeking the permission of the owner to conduct timber operations on their forest lands, then you enter into a contract or a grant, per the case that you read from the Russian Basin, and specifically Jenner, which is at the mouth of the Russian River. And that contract establishes the terms under which the timber operation will occur, meaning does the owner get paid a royalty, or is it just a flat annual fee? What's the term? Is the term subject to renewal? What's the maximum amount of timber? Can the timber operator build a road? Does the timber operator have an obligation to restore? I mean, you get the point. You can ask dozens of questions along those lines, and the contract itself must specify, contract or grant must specify the understanding between the owner and the timber operator. Now, let me teach you one thing about a contract or a grant. In other words, a transaction between two private entities. You may have learned this in contract law, and so apologies for repeating it, but I really learned it for the first time in my first job when the managing partner for the law firm looked at us and he said, "None of you are real attorneys yet." And of course we all sort of, what do you mean we're not real attorneys? And then he said, no, you become a real attorney the day that a client comes to you and says, "Remember that contract you wrote for me 5 years ago?" Or maybe it was 10 or 20. And you say, "You bet, I sure do." And the client then says, "Well, what about this circumstance? This just happened. What does the contract do? What does it mean?" And the partner went on to say, at that moment, you realize you didn't anticipate this circumstance in the contract. The contract on its face does not have a clear remedy or provision for management of that circumstance. And then he said, that's the day you become an attorney, because you realize next contract you write, you better do a better job of looking ahead. And we all make mistakes. It's inherent in the human condition. Sometimes we make big mistakes, no matter how diligent we are. And it is your job as an attorney to help fix that error and, perhaps stated less pejoratively, solve the client's problem, even though the contract on its face does not. So generally speaking, a contract for natural resources development, or for that matter, other forms of commerce, will have some catch-all meet and confer, dispute resolution, arbitration, or some such, essentially a procedure whereby the parties to the contract undertake to cure the deficiency in the contract and preserve what are called the bargain for benefits of the contract through that procedure. So a contract for a timber operation on private land, at least a modern contract, will always have a procedure like that, in addition to, hopefully, provisions that anticipate all of the foreseeable circumstances that might arise in the course of the timber operation. Okay, at this point, we're roughly at minute 50, including a 10-minute break. That means that I'm done with lecture to give you 2 hours to answer the questions in my assignment. As I said in the text, in the assignment, the purpose really is to help me evaluate where you are in your understanding of natural resources law and more generally in your development as a soon-to-be attorney in framing a problem and then understanding relevant authority and then solving it. Please approach the assignment in that spirit. There is no wrong answer in the sense that whatever you say will help me evaluate. I hope that you have read the assignments carefully before you provide your answers, because of course legally there are right and wrong answers. But again, the primary purpose of this is just for me to evaluate where you are. No grade. This won't affect your grade, but if I think you do very well, or if I think you need improvement, then you'll hear from me, and hopefully we can arrange for some time over the course of the remaining weeks of this course to talk about your answers and how to improve. Okay? Again, thanks so much for your patience with this teaching, this alternative to in-person teaching. I hope this is informative, and again, I look forward to receiving your answers on the assignment, and I also look forward to seeing you on April 1st. Good luck with the assignment. Have a great week. See you soon.